Hello programmers, welcome to another Introduction to Java tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about loops. So what are loops? Well, very simply, if you have something that you want to occur multiple times, you'd need to use a loop. So a loop will repeat a set of instructions either for a defined amount of times or until something specific happens. In Java, we have three main types of loops, but since you guys don't know anything about arrays yet, and you won't learn that until our next tutorial, we're only going to be talking about two types of loops today, while loops and for loops. So without further ado, let's get started. How about we start off with a while loop? In order to create my while loop, I'm going to first create a variable. I'm going to make my variable an integer. I'm going to call it maximum, and I'm going to set it to 50. The syntax for a while loop goes like so. In order to write a while loop, you must first write while, and then open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and brackets. Looks kind of similar to an if statement, doesn't it? So what goes within these two parentheses? Well, once again, as with a conditional statement, what we need to do is put some form of a Boolean expression into this while loop. So, while, let's say, x is less than maximum. Now, the compiler is not going to be happy with me because I haven't yet defined x. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say int x equals 0. Okay, so now I have a while loop with a conditional statement and while int x is less than maximum. Now let's put something in here like system.out.print, and then let's do something like x, and a space. Sounds good. Actually, we can lower this number to something like 20. There we go. And then let's put some form of a modifier of x into this loop. And then we'll go and talk about what exactly I'm doing to this x and why I'm doing this and how this loop functions in the first place. So let's talk about this code right here. So I've set up a integer variable called maximum, and I've set up another variable called x. And I say while x is less than maximum, execute the following code. So first, print x space, and then advance x by 1. So add 1 to x. Now what's going to happen is the computer is going to get to this while, and it's going to say, okay, what is the value of x? It's 0. What is the value of maximum? It's 20. Okay, so 0 is less than 20. So it's going to go in here, and it's going to say, okay, so I'm going to system.out.print this, and then I'm going to say x equals x plus 1, so now x is equal to 1. And then it's going to come back up here, and it's going to say, oh, so now x equals 1. Well, 1 is still less than 20, so I'm going to do this again, and it will go again and again and again and again until x is equal to 20. And then it'll come back up here, and it'll say, x is 20. Is 20 less than 20? Well, no. So then it's going to stop, and then it will proceed with code down here. So let's go ahead and run this code and see what it looks like on the console. Look at that. We printed x a whole bunch of times. So our code worked just like we wanted it to. There you go. Now you have a while statement. Now this while statement executed a set of instructions a specific amount of times, but one of the advantages of using a while statement in your code is that in the future, when we learn about things like input, or if you're programming something else where variables are changing and you have a very complex program, while statements allow you to loop until a specific condition is met. So you don't need to loop for a defined amount of times. Like if I had a program where I was requiring input from the user, I could say repeat these instructions until the user types in some specific word. So that is the advantage of while loops. But for now, all you need to understand is that while this condition is true, it will continue to loop through this code. Here's one danger of while loops. If you forget something like this statement, which allows this variable to advance, the problem is that this x would never change and hence x would always be less than maximum, and it would stay that way for infinity. So this loop right here would run to infinity. This is what we call an infinite loop, and it's something that you should probably avoid in your code because it might not be good for it. It would probably mean the end of your class, and it would not be good for the functionality of your program. So anyways, let's go back to our class, and let's write the next kind of loop, which is called a for loop. So how do for loops work? Well, their syntax is a bit more complicated, but they are very similar to while loops in the way that they function. So let's write the syntax for a for loop. In order to write a for loop, we must write for, and then we need to declare a variable inside the loop. I know it sounds strange, but bear with me. So usually you want to, or actually most of the time, always, you want to declare an integer type variable, and we can name it whatever we want. So I'm going to name it I equals 0. Then we use a semicolon, and then we put a condition similar to the one here. So while I is less than 50, another semicolon, and then we do I plus plus. And then open bracket and close bracket, and then we can put something else like system.out.print. We can put our favorite X statement back in here. Maybe we want to change this to a print line just to give us something new. And there we go. Now we have created a for loop. So let's go over the syntax real quick. First of all, we type for. We create a new variable, and this variable is specific to the loop. So if you come out here and you say something like print I or I equals 6, the computer is going to be very confused. It doesn't think I exists out here. The computer only thinks that I exists within the loop. So if you want to manipulate I outside of the loop, what you're going to need to do is declare I outside of the loop and then just assign it to 0 as the initial value for the loop inside the loop, something like this. But for our purposes, let's just keep with I being a variable that is only specific to this loop. So we declare a variable for our loop, which we're calling I, short for iterator, and then, although it could be called anything, could be like my or hi or whatever you want, and then we're setting the upper limit of the loop. So repeat until I is less than 50, and then we're saying I plus plus, or advance I by 1. This is the same thing as saying I equals I plus 1, but I plus plus is, of course, a much shorter way of saying this. If you want to subtract 1, you could also do I minus minus, but since we have a situation where I is less than a specific value, we're going to want to say I plus plus so I can eventually get to 50. Anyways, while I is less than 50, it's going to go ahead and print this statement right here. So we should say that it prints this X and space about 50 times on 50 different lines. There we go. So what you are seeing is that the X goes ahead and prints 50 times on 50 different lines. I just needed to resave my program and run it again. And there you go. That's a for loop for you. So now we have successfully learned how to create a while loop and how to create a for loop. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope to see you guys next week.